Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Gallagher puts a spotlight today on sexual harassment and the consequences. Incredibly timely. And he also lets you see the human side of ethics. All right, one of the greatest ethics speakers, the best ethics speaker I've ever seen. Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Gallagher.
So next door, those were pediatricians. And they asked me on the way out, they said, is it a bunch of children next door? What is the deal? So we've definitely made an impression. Okay, so I want to ask you a question. Now, I'm going to give you a break today, and that is there is no video to have to watch. But I got a question. How many of you have watched the movie Forrest Gump? Oh, yeah. See, everybody's seen the movie Forrest Gump. Now, if you're like me, as you can tell by the color of my hair, when Forrest Gump first came down, I remember sitting there watching the movie and just laughing hysterically. It was great fun. And the cool part about it is most of that I lived through. So it's a weird experience to watch a movie that is comedic, but that you live through it. So you see these things and it means something to you that, you kind of get the underlying meaning of some of what was taking place. And I probably watched the movie 4 or 5 times. But back in the fall, my 2 granddaughters, they came over and they said, hey, Chucky, what are we going to watch tonight? And I named over a couple of things and they said, seen it. And I'm like, okay, I got one for you, Forrest Gump. Huh? I said, let's watch that. So we sat down to watch this movie. Now, here's the experience and the reason we're starting with that. So I'm sitting here watching this movie, and I'm fascinated because, A, my granddaughters are laughing at the points that are supposed to be laughed at because the way they wrote the movie was just funny. But they didn't understand the underlying meaning. And it seems like every time I watch that movie, it's like peeling the layer of an onion back. You kind of get a deeper meaning. And I'm sitting there, and it hits me. So go with me to this scene. Now, here's little Forrest. Little Forrest, not the sharpest knife in the drawer, right? And the school wanted to put him in a different school. Now, in my generation, when I was in school as a little kid, it would have been called special ed. So here it is, the school is making the determination that little Forrest has to go to special ed. And if you imagine the scene in the movie, he's sitting outside the principal's office, just sitting there. His mama's inside. Mama, remember, was Sally Field. So his mama's inside, and the principal's just delivered the message that he's got to go to the special school. And she looks up at him and she says, surely there is something we can do to keep Forrest in this school. And if you remember, the principal was standing behind the desk and he looks at Forrest's mama and he said, is there a Mr. Gump, Mrs. Gump? Y'all remember that? And she looks back and she says, he's on vacation. And the next scene, Forrest is sitting in a little swing attached to an oak tree swinging. And up in the light of the house, you hear these sounds. And you kind of can figure what's taking place. Next scene, principal walks out, wiping his brow. I mean, that man is wore out. He looks down, Forrest is sitting on the step at this point. He says, son, your mama sure must want you to have an education. Forrest says nothing. Principal looks back, he says, you don't say much, do you, boy? And y'all remember, Forrest sat there and went, and everybody cracks up. Well, my granddaughters are cracking up, but I'm like, oh, whoa, time out. Yo. It's the fall of 2017. Let me think. I mean, Jeffrey Weinstein. Let's go down the names. Louis C.K., Dustin Hoffman. Really, Tootsie? Are you serious? It's so sad. But think about literally just about every day since the fall of 2017, somehow, some way, the discussion of sexual harassment takes place in the news. And I sat there and I looked at that and I thought, wow, that would be a great clip for the program that I've got, because here's what it illustrated. Now, think about it for a second. What did Forrest's mom want? She wanted an education for her child. She didn't walk into the principal's office thinking, you are something fine. Let's see what we... That didn't happen. She wanted an education for her child. What did the principal have? The power to give that education. And so therefore he used his power in this harassing way. Now, so let me be really personal. I was born in 1957. I was adopted at birth. It was the greatest gift my biological parents could ever give me. And so, and the greatest gift that my adopted parents could ever receive, because neither one of them were capable of having children and both wanted children desperately. So here I am. I know you can look at me and think, I don't know if that was such a gift, but here I am at that point, this little gift. 2 years later, my father died, diabetic complications. And my mother, by this time, 1959, is thrust into being a widow and a single parent all at the same time, which was not the model of the world she anticipated. And so I sat there and I watched this movie and I thought to myself, if I was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, would I have known what she might have had to go through in order to make sure that I got the education that I got and that I was going to be okay, knowing my mother was a single parent who did not have a high school education? What did it take? Sometimes you sit back and you think about the generations that we've lived in, and you look at what's taken place, and you start to think about where are we today and what really has happened. Now, let me say this to be crystal clear. We've got 5 generations in the workplace, technically 4 that are fairly active at this point, and every generation sees things from a different set of lenses. So what was okay 30 years ago or 20 years ago may not be okay 10 years ago or 5, certainly not 2, but let's go to the past year and start asking ourselves the question, do we know what the rules are, and are we carrying on that conversation? Because far too many times I see organizations that deal with the issue of sexual harassment by taking out antiquated videos, showing them from time to time, checking off a box, and never having a conversation. And that's not getting us any place. It's not moving the needle. So let's talk about some move the needle kind of weird experiences. We got a short period of time, so I'm going to shrink it so we can think about some things that might make some sense. So I'm a member of the National Speakers Association. I happened to be at a National Speakers Association meeting, and it was a small group, and 4 of us decided we were going to go to dinner. I happened to have my car available. So here we are. I'm going to pick on this row for just a second. Now, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just going to pick on you. But here it is, 2 guys, 1 lady. We're all going out to my car. Okay, the 2 guys decide they're going to get in the back seat. The young lady, who was 25 years my junior-ish, millennial, early 30s. So she's going to get in the passenger seat. So what do? The baby boomer guy walks around and does what? Opens the door. And she looks at me and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm opening your door." I was like, "No." She said, "Why?" And I said, "Because it's the gentlemanly thing to do." I'm thinking, if I didn't do that, my mama from up in heaven would come and beat me, because that's how I learned to dance. A switch. Wow, Lord have mercy, mama, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. She looks at me and she says, "Well, let me ask you this question." She said, "Would you open it for these guys? Would you open it for Steve?" I'm thinking, yeah, probably not. She said, "Well, you're just sexist." And I'm like, whoa. But it hit me, well, maybe I am. Maybe my generation was taught a way to act, because these are the lenses that we learn through. And her generation says, well, wait a minute. If we're all equal people, then why are you treating me unequally? If you're not going to do it for Steve, why would you for me? And listen, I know some of you in the room are like, are you kidding? But I've been in seminars, and so I've asked groups that question. I said, listen, let me ask you the question. If I went to open your car door, would you think that I'm a gentleman or sexist? And most of the time, about 75% of the time, it's gentleman. But I'm getting 25% of the time sexist. And it's like, well, maybe I need to learn something here. Perhaps the lesson is, I would say to you, would you like for me to open your door? And if she says, well, yes, thank you, then I'd be happy to do it. And if she says, no, I got it. Okay, baby, that's fine. It's your thing. Do what you want to do. I mean, I have to be honest with you. I sit back and I see my 31-year-old son, and I think, you might have a little more success on a date if you're a little more of a gentleman. But maybe that whole generation sees the world from a different perspective. If I came along, I'm going to pick on Garland for a second, but you've been sitting here all day. So if I came along and I started rubbing her shoulders because we knew each other, is it good?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I am demonstrating sexual harassment in the first degree. Now, she might say that feels good. You're welcome. She'll never hire me again. Oh, no. But think about it. I might sit there and there was no intention of an issue. In fact, I've had people say to me, well, it's how the person that's receiving it perceives it. No, not right. That might be fine here, but if someone else in the organization looks and the policy is thou shalt not touch, they're going to look and say, see that old man touching that woman, better not happen to me, and I am in violation of the policy. Sometimes we have to think. I sat back. It doesn't always happen men to women. I'm going to give you a completely different version. So I had a lady that said to me one time, we were at an NSA meeting, and she said, I'd like to talk with you about, how you really kick in marketing in a speaking career. And I said, I'll be happy to do that. So we met at Panera Bread, sat down, had a nice conversation, about an hour and a half. We talked through some concepts and so forth, not a big deal. And she said, I'd love to get together again and continue to pick your brain. And I said, sure, no problem. So I'm at my office in Greenville, South Carolina. I get a call about 4:30 in the afternoon. She said, I'm here, I had been doing a program. I finished. Would you like to meet me this afternoon so I can continue to talk with you? And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So we went to a local restaurant, no big deal, public place. We're sitting there, and we're talking, sitting in a booth, facing each other, carrying on a nice conversation, talking about marketing for the speaking profession, and the next thing I know, I feel something rubbing my leg. And I'm like, is somebody's little, service animal loose or something other than got a hold of my leg? And apparently I'm looking down and she says, oh, I dropped my shoe. And I'm thinking to myself, now, if you dropped your shoe, you're going to stick your foot down to try to find it. You're not going to reach across the booth, sit there and rub up and down my ankle. I'm like, it wasn't a bad feeling, I have to admit, but it was not an appropriate feeling. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, let me get this in my head. Now, think about the issue of power. Because I've interviewed 1,277 women over the past 2 years in preparation for the program that somehow God blessed and the world decided we need to talk about this topic. And of those, 81% of them said, yes, I have been sexually harassed. Then I asked the next question. If you have been sexually harassed, was it power or just pure plain sex? And 67% of them said it was really a power-driven issue. The rest of them said, they just didn't know when to say, they didn't understand no. But it's fascinating to understand what that experience is, and the reverse can take place. Let's be really honest with each other. In her case, she wanted more information. I was glad to give the information, but rubbing the back of my calf was the signal of, are you interested in carrying this thing further? Because I have the power, hypothetically, to give you something that you might want. Because I want something from you. So, what do we do in our organizations? Here's the thing. Every organization has its Matt Lauer. Sorry. But every organization has that. So here's the question. Whether it is a government organization, whether it is an association, whether it is a company, what are you doing to elevate the conversation? Because when that person rises to the top and the media is all over it, which we all know they will be, someone's going to come along with a camera and they're going to be doing this and saying, and what did you do about that? And if the answer to that question is, that's a problem. Are you willing to elevate the conversation? I started with the movie Forrest Gump. So I'm sitting there with my 2 granddaughters, and I'm watching this movie, and it kind of hits me. It's like, whoa, that's another layer of the onion peel back. And it occurs to me that all of us in this room can be the difference. That's the title to this program. Be the difference, recognizing and preventing sexual harassment in the workplace. We can be the difference. We can elevate the conversation. We can do something that actually will move the needle forward. Because here's the thing. As I sat there watching the movie, it occurred to me, with my 2 little granddaughters thinking, well, Chucky's picked a good movie. Here's what I thought. I hope and pray in my lifetime that by elevating the conversation, they will never hold up a sign that said, me too. Thank you very much.